Commander Vex 9 adjusted his 6 sensory stalks as he reviewed the mission briefing for the 1,000th time. The Galactic Council had been very specific about their objective: capture and study the most dangerous predator known to exist in the Outer Rim territories. According to every database, every scout report, and every terrified survivor account, this creature was the ultimate killing machine. "Attention crew," Vex 9 announced through the ship's communication array, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that came from commanding 17 different species across 42 star systems. "We are approaching the water world designated as Earth-Adjacent 7. Intelligence reports indicate the apex predator resides in the southern continental mass, specifically in what the local inhabitants call Australia." Lieutenant Crix, a purple-scaled reptilian from the Andromeda sector, looked up from his tactical station. His yellow eyes gleamed with what could only be described as professional excitement. "Sir, are we absolutely certain we want to engage this creature? The reports suggest it has defeated entire military units from 3 different civilizations." "That's precisely why the Council wants it studied, Lieutenant," Vex 9 replied, his tone dripping with the kind of confidence that usually preceded spectacular failures. "If we can understand how this predator operates, we can potentially weaponize its abilities for the greater good of the galaxy." Senior Science Officer Mira 12, whose species resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a particularly ambitious houseplant, floated closer to the command console. Her translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concern. "Commander, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from the planet's surface. There are some unusual readings." "Define unusual," Mira 12. "Well, sir, there appear to be multiple apex predators on this world. Thousands of them, actually. And they seem to coexist with another species that shows signs of advanced intelligence." Vex 9's stalks twitched in annoyance. "Impossible. Every galactic survey confirms that apex predators are singular entities. They don't form societies, and they certainly don't share territory with intelligent life." "Perhaps the intelligent species serves as prey," suggested Crix, his claws clicking against his control panel in nervous anticipation. "Or perhaps," Mira 12 said, with the kind of scientific curiosity that had gotten her species into trouble on 17 different occasions, "we don't understand this planet as well as we think we do." The ship's sensors suddenly erupted in a cacophony of alarms. Navigation Officer Zek, whose species had evolved from what could generously be described as sentient mushrooms, spun around in his control seat. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's in perfect galactic standard." "Put it through," Vex 9 commanded, his confidence now showing its first hairline cracks. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a bipedal creature with remarkably unremarkable features. It had only 2 eyes, positioned at the front of its head like a predator, but its overall appearance suggested something far more mundane than the terror-inducing apex predator they'd come to capture. "G'day, mates," the creature said, with what could only be described as inappropriate cheerfulness given the circumstances. "Name's Jake Thompson. I run the wildlife sanctuary down here in Queensland. Noticed your ship on our sensors. Figured you might be those alien blokes the government boys have been expecting." The entire bridge fell silent. This was not how first contact with apex predator territories was supposed to proceed. "You are the apex predator?" Vex 9 asked, his stalks now twitching in what his species used to indicate severe confusion. Jake laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly unnerving. "Apex predator? Mate, I'm just a wildlife keeper. Though I suppose if you're looking for apex predators, you've come to the right place. Got a few beauties I could show you." "A few," Crix whispered, his scales shifting to a pale green color that indicated existential dread. "Oh yeah," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the terror he was causing among the ship's crew. "Got saltwater crocs, great whites, box jellies, taipans, funnel webs, blue rings, dingoes, drop bears, and that's just the ones in this particular sanctuary. Australia's got apex predators the way other planets have rocks, mate." Mira 12's bioluminescent patterns began flashing in rapid succession, which in her species indicated either extreme excitement or the onset of a nervous breakdown. "Commander, he's suggesting multiple apex predator species coexisting in a single ecosystem. That should be impossible." "Should be," Jake said, apparently having overheard the comment. "But here we are. You folks want to come down and have a look? Just landed a 16-footer yesterday. Cranky old boy, but he's a real beauty." 16 units, Vex 9 asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "In galactic measurements, that would make the creature larger than most space frigates." "Feet, mate. About 5 meters if you're using that fancy metric system. Course, he's not the biggest we've got. Old Brutus down at the sanctuary's pushing 23 feet. He's what we call a proper unit." The bridge crew exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken terror. Their quarry wasn't a single apex predator. It was an entire collection of them, apparently kept as pets by this impossibly casual bipedal creature. You keep them as specimens for study?" Mira 12 managed to ask, her patterns now strobing in what could only be described as scientific awe mixed with species-wide panic. "Study?" Jake laughed again. "Nah, mate. We keep 'em because someone's got to. Conservation, you know? These old boys have been around since the dinosaurs. Wouldn't be right to let 'em disappear just because people get a bit nervous around teeth." "A bit nervous," Crix muttered, his claws now clicking so rapidly they sounded like maracas. "Around teeth. Tell you what," Jake continued, his smile somehow managing to be both welcoming and terrifying in its complete lack of concern for galactic-level threats. "Why don't you folks come down for a visit? I'll give you the grand tour. Show you some real apex predators. Fair warning, though, feeding time's in about an hour, so things might get a bit lively." Vex 9 realized he was facing a decision that would either make his career or end it spectacularly. Every protocol suggested they should maintain safe distance and observe from orbit. Every instinct told him this human creature was either completely insane or so dangerous that it made their target apex predators look like household pets. "We accept your invitation," he heard himself saying, much to the horror of his entire crew. "Brilliant," Jake said, clapping his hands together in a gesture that somehow managed to sound like gunfire through the communication array. "I'll meet you at the landing pad. Oh, and fair warning, try not to make any sudden movements around the Crocs. They're a bit sensitive about strangers." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. "Sir," Crix said finally, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had just realized he was about to become the universe's most exotic snack, "are we really doing this?" "Lieutenant," Vex 9 replied, his stalks now twitching in what his species used to indicate either determination or complete madness. "We came here to study the galaxy's apex predators. It appears we're about to get a much more comprehensive education than we bargained for." "Commander," Mira 12 interjected, her patterns now settling into the steady glow that indicated scientific resignation. "I feel I should point out that our insurance policy specifically excludes death by apex predator. Then we'd better hope Vex-9 said as he began initiating landing procedures, that Mr. Thompson's definition of a bit lively is somewhat more conservative than his definition of apex predator. The ship's engines hummed to life as they began their descent toward the planet's surface, carrying with them the hopes and dreams of the Galactic Council, along with what was rapidly becoming the certain knowledge that those hopes and dreams were about to become very expensive funeral arrangements. As they broke through the atmosphere, Crix couldn't help but notice that the continent below was surrounded by what appeared to be an unusual amount of oceanic activity. Large shapes moved beneath the waves, occasionally breaching the surface in displays that sent massive sprays of water hundreds of feet into the air. "Sir," he said, his voice now carrying the particular quality of someone who had just realized that their problems were significantly larger than previously imagined. "I think the apex predators in the water might be even bigger than the ones on land." "Nonsense," Vex-9 replied, though his stalks were now twitching so rapidly they were becoming difficult to see. "Nothing could be bigger than a 16-foot apex predator." Far below them, a blue whale surfaced to breathe, its 100-foot length casting a shadow across the landing coordinates Jake had provided. "Right," Crix muttered, his scales now cycling through colors that hadn't been seen since his species' last extinction event. Nothing at all. The landing pad came into view, a small clearing surrounded by what appeared to be reinforced barriers and warning signs in multiple languages. Standing in the center, wearing what could only be described as the most casual clothing in galactic history, was Jake Thompson, waving cheerfully as if greeting old friends rather than potentially signing death warrants for an entire alien crew. "Landing in 30 seconds, Zek announced, his mushroom-like form now taking on the distinctly wilted appearance that his species displayed during times of extreme stress. "Excellent," Vex-9 said, his confidence now sounding like someone trying to convince themselves that jumping off a cliff was really just an alternative form of transportation. "Prepare the away team." As the ship touched down with a gentle thud, Jake approached with the easy stride of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with enthusiasm, and what appeared to be an alarming lack of concern for personal safety. "Welcome to Australia, mates!" His voice carried through the ship's external speakers. "Hope you're ready for the adventure of a lifetime." "Adventure," Mira 12 murmured, her bioluminescence now flickering in what could only be described as the biological equivalent of hysteria. "I think that might be the most terrifying word in the Galactic Dictionary." "Nonsense," Vex-9 said, activating the airlock controls. "What could possibly go wrong?" As the doors opened and the sound of something massive splashing into water echoed from somewhere nearby, followed by what could only be described as the satisfied grunt of a very large, very content predator, the crew realized they were about to find out exactly what could go wrong, in excruciating, teeth-filled detail. Jake's cheerful wave continued unabated, as if the sound of apex predators settling in for their afternoon snack was the most normal thing in the universe, which, from his perspective, it probably was. "Right then," he called out as they began to disembark, "who wants to meet Brutus first?" The away team consisted of Vex-9, Crix, Mira 12, and Dr. Thane 7, whose species had evolved from what could best be described as sentient coral formations. They moved cautiously across the landing pad, their various forms of locomotion creating a symphony of clicks, squishes, and nervous rustling. Jake Thompson stood waiting with the patience of someone who had spent years dealing with creatures that could bite him in half without breaking a sweat. His khaki clothing bore numerous patches and stains that spoke of intimate encounters with things that had claws, teeth, and presumably terrible attitudes about personal space. Beautiful day for it, Jake announced, gesturing toward the sky where something with wings the size of a small spacecraft was circling lazily overhead. That's just Walter. Don't mind him. He's a wedgie. Likes to keep an eye on visitors. Wedgie? Crix asked, his translator struggling with the unfamiliar term. Wedge-tailed eagle. Biggest bird of prey on the continent. Wingspans about 3 meters. Bit of a show-off, but harmless enough unless you're a rabbit. Dr. Thane Seven's coral-like structure began shifting colors rapidly, which in his species indicated extreme biological confusion. You classify a 3-meter aerial predator as harmless? Well, Jake said with the kind of grin that suggested he was about to share information that would ruin everyone's day. Everything's relative, isn't it? Come on then, let's start with something gentle. He led them toward what appeared to be a reinforced concrete barrier with viewing windows. The sound of water lapping gently against artificial shores drifted from beyond the wall, accompanied by occasional splashing that seemed far too large to be coming from anything gentle. Now, before we meet Brutus, Jake said, stopping at what appeared to be a control panel covered in warning labels written in 17 different languages, I should probably mention that he's having a bit of a day. One of the tour groups from yesterday left their lunch cooler a bit too close to the enclosure, and, well, let's just say Brutus has developed a taste for ham sandwiches. Ham sandwiches? Mira 12's bioluminescent patterns flickered in confusion. Your apex predator consumes processed meat products? Oh, he'll eat anything, really. Ham sandwiches, fish, birds, the occasional tourist who doesn't listen to safety briefings. Jake said this with such casual delivery that it took several seconds for the implications to sink in. I'm joking about the tourists, of course. Mostly. The word mostly hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud. Jake pressed several buttons on the control panel, and the concrete barrier began to slide downward with mechanical precision. Right then, meet Brutus. What revealed itself beyond the barrier defied every classification system the Galactic Council had ever developed. The creature floating in the artificial lagoon was essentially a living siege engine wrapped in scales and bad intentions. Its eyes, positioned on top of its head like organic periscopes, regarded the alien visitors with the kind of intelligence that suggested it was already calculating how much seasoning each of them would require. 23 feet of pure Australian engineering, Jake said proudly, as if he had personally designed the monster. Been with us for about 15 years now. Found him as a baby after his mum was killed by poachers. Bottle-fed him for months. You, bottle-fed. That? Vex 9's stalks had stopped twitching entirely, which in his species indicated either complete tranquility or total system failure. Course I did. Little fella was only about 2 feet long then. Cute as a button. Jake reached into his pocket and produced what appeared to be a chunk of raw meat, the size of a small spacecraft component. Who wants to help with feeding time? The collective silence from the away team was so profound it could have been measured in astronomical units. I'll take that as a no, Jake chuckled, tossing the meat toward the water. What happened next redefined the team's understanding of physics, biology, and their own mortality. Brutus erupted from the water with a speed that suggested the laws of hydrodynamics were merely suggestions in his presence. His jaws, which could have comfortably housed a small shuttlecraft, snapped shut on the meat with a sound like a building collapsing. The splash from his landing sent waves across the enclosure that would have qualified as minor tsunamis on most civilized worlds. "Good boy, Brutus," Jake called out, apparently unaware that he had just witnessed what could only be described as a demonstration of portable apocalypse. "That's why we keep him well fed. Hungry crocodiles get cranky. Crocodile, Dr. Thane-7 repeated, his coral structure now cycling through colors that hadn't been seen since his homeworld's last volcanic age. This is a crocodile. Saltwater crocodiles, specifically. Crocodilus porosus. Been around for about 200 million years, give or take. They've perfected the art of being absolutely terrifying. 200 million years, Mira 12 whispered, her patterns now strobing in what could only be described as scientific revelation mixed with existential terror. Commander, this species has been perfecting predatory behavior since before most galactic civilizations developed written language. And there are more of them? Crix asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer and deeply regretted asking the question. Oh, thousands, Jake replied cheerfully. Salties, freshies, American gators, caimans, gharials, crocodilians are a successful family. Of course, they're not the only apex predators we've got here. He began walking toward another section of the sanctuary, past signs that warned of various forms of creative death in multiple galactic languages. Fancy meeting some sharks? Sharks, Vex 9 repeated, the word emerging from his translator with the kind of mechanical precision that indicated his language centers were operating on emergency power. Oceanic apex predators. Been around even longer than the crocs. About 400 million years of evolutionary refinement focused entirely on being perfect killing machines. Jake's enthusiasm for these statistics was deeply unsettling. Got a few beauties in our marine section. They approached what appeared to be a massive aquarium complex, its transparent aluminum walls providing clear views into water so blue it seemed artificial. For a moment, the crew allowed themselves to relax. The water appeared empty, peaceful even. Then something the size of a small starship glided past the viewing window. That's Sheila, Jake announced with obvious pride. Great white shark, about 7 meters long, probably weighs close to 3 tons. She's our gentle giant. The creature in question turned with fluid grace and approached the window, her black eyes regarding the alien visitors with what could generously be called professional interest. Her mouth, which was essentially a mobile weapons array filled with triangular death, opened slightly to reveal rows of teeth that seemed to go on forever. Gentle, Crix managed to croak, his scales now cycling through colors that suggested his species was reconsidering their entire evolutionary path. Oh, yeah. Sheila's a sweetheart. Never bitten anyone who didn't deserve it. Of course, she's got very specific ideas about who deserves it. Jake tapped on the glass, and the massive shark responded by gliding closer, her ancient eyes never leaving the alien crew. Sharks are fascinating creatures. They've got electroreception, can sense a heartbeat from kilometers away. Probably knows exactly how terrified you all are right now. As if responding to his words, Sheila's mouth opened wider, revealing what appeared to be several hundred reasons why swimming was overrated as a recreational activity. Commander, Dr. Thane-7 said, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone who had just realized that their problems were about to become significantly more complex. I'm detecting multiple large life forms approaching from the oceanic perimeter. Jake glanced toward the horizon where, sure enough, distinctive dorsal fins were cutting through the water with the purposeful motion of creatures who had heard dinner was being served. Oh, that'll be the rest of the pod. Sheila's got friends. Don't worry, though. The barriers are rated for pretty much anything short of a direct asteroid strike. Pretty much anything. Mira 12's bioluminescence had settled into a steady, panicked glow. Well, we've never tested them against a really motivated great white. Science is all about controlled experiments, isn't it? Before anyone could respond to this deeply troubling statement, an alarm began sounding from somewhere deeper in the sanctuary. Jake's expression shifted from casual enthusiasm to something that might have been mild concern. "That's the reptile house," he said, pulling out a communication device. "Tommy, what's the situation?" A voice crackled through the speaker, accompanied by what sounded like something large moving through vegetation at high speed. "Jake, we've got a situation with the inland taipan exhibit. One of the automated feeders malfunctioned, and Nigel's gone walkabout." "Nigel?" Vex 9 asked, though part of him suspected he didn't want to know. "Inland taipan. Most venomous land snake on the planet. Bite from Nigel could kill 100 adult humans in under an hour." Jake was already moving toward the reptile house, apparently expecting the alien crew to follow him toward what could only be described as a mobile apocalypse with scales. "He's probably just looking for a quiet spot to digest his lunch, but we should probably find him before he decides to explore." "Before he decides to explore," Crix repeated, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone whose day had officially transitioned from concerning to potentially fatal. The reptile house was a climate-controlled facility that seemed designed by someone who had very specific ideas about what constituted appropriate housing for creatures that existed solely to end other creatures' existence. Glass enclosures lined the walls, each containing specimens that defied rational explanation. "That's a funnel web spider," Jake explained, as they passed an enclosure containing what appeared to be a small tank armed with legs and attitude. "Aggressive little fella, venom's nasty stuff. Next to him, we've got a blue-ringed octopus. Beautiful colors, deadly as anything you'll find in this galaxy." The blue-ringed octopus in question chose that moment to display its warning colors, creating a light show that was simultaneously gorgeous and terrifying. Dr. Thane 7's coral structure began shifting through sympathetic color patterns before he caught himself. "There!" Tommy called out from the far end of the facility. "Found Nigel!" He's made himself comfortable in the Visitor Information Center. They arrived at the Information Center to find a snake approximately 2 meters long coiled contentedly on what appeared to be a display case containing educational materials about Australian wildlife. The snake's coloration was understated, almost modest, which somehow made it more terrifying than if it had been bright purple with warning labels. "Now that's a proper danger noodle," Jake said with obvious affection. "Nigel, you can't sleep there, mate. Tourists need those brochures." The snake regarded Jake with the kind of patience that suggested it had been dealing with humans for some time and had reached certain conclusions about their intelligence levels. "How do you propose to relocate it?" Mira 12 asked, her scientific curiosity warring with her survival instincts. "Same way I handle all the dangerous ones," Jake replied, reaching for what appeared to be a long pole with a hook on the end. "Very carefully, and with a healthy respect for what they're capable of." What followed was a demonstration in creature handling that redefined the crew's understanding of both courage and insanity. Jake approached the snake with the casual confidence of someone who had clearly done this hundreds of times, gently coaxing Nigel onto the hook and guiding him toward a transport container. "The key," Jake explained as he worked, "is understanding that they're not malicious. They're just really, really good at being what they are. Apex predators don't attack out of spite. They attack because it's their nature. Respect that nature, and you can coexist." "Coexist," Vex 9 repeated, watching as Jake successfully relocated one of the most venomous creatures in known space with the same casual efficiency most beings used to rearrange furniture. "That's the thing about Australia," Jake continued, securing Nigel's container and beginning the walk back toward the main facility. "We've got more ways to die than anywhere else on the planet, but we've also figured out how to live alongside all of them. It's about balance, really." As they walked, the full scope of the sanctuary became apparent. Enclosures stretched in all directions, each containing specimens that would qualify as galactic-level threats on any civilized world. Yet here they were, maintained and cared for by humans who treated them like particularly dangerous pets. "Commander," Dr. Thane 7 said, his voice carrying the tone of someone who had just experienced a profound realization, "I don't think we came here to capture the apex predator." "What do you mean?" "I mean," the doctor continued, gesturing toward Jake, who was now casually discussing feeding schedules with Tommy while standing next to an enclosure containing what appeared to be a spider the size of a dinner plate. "I think we're looking at it." The crew stood in silence, watching as Jake Thompson, wildlife keeper and apparent master of creatures that could end civilizations, went about his daily routine of caring for the galaxy's most dangerous predators with the same casual competence other beings used to tend gardens. "Right then," Jake called out, having finished his conversation. "Who wants to see the drop bears?" "Drop bears?" Crix asked weakly. "Oh yeah," Jake grinned. "They're the really dangerous ones." As Jake led them deeper into the sanctuary, past enclosures containing nightmares that evolution had spent millions of years perfecting, the alien crew began to understand a fundamental truth about Earth and its inhabitants. The apex predators weren't the crocodiles, or the sharks, or the snakes, or the spiders. The apex predators were the beings who looked at all of these perfect killing machines and decided they made excellent roommates. "You know what the funny thing is?" Jake said as they walked, his voice carrying over the sounds of various predators settling in for their afternoon activities. "Most people think humans are the scary ones on this planet." He gestured toward an enclosure where something with too many legs was constructing what appeared to be a web capable of stopping small aircraft. "Truth is, we're just the ones who figured out how to get along with everything else. And that," he concluded, with the kind of smile that suggested he was sharing a cosmic joke, "makes us the most dangerous species of all." The Galactic Council's mission to capture and study the galaxy's apex predator had been completed, though not in the way anyone had expected. They had found their apex predator and discovered that it came in khaki clothing, spoke in cheerful Australian accents, and considered creatures capable of ending civilizations to be bit of a handful at worst. As their ship prepared for departure later that evening, loaded with data that would revolutionize galactic understanding of predator-prey relationships, Vex 9 couldn't help but reflect on the day's revelations. "Sir," Crix asked as they achieved orbit, "what exactly are we going to tell the Council?" Vex 9 looked down at the continent below, where Jake Thompson was probably settling in for another quiet evening, surrounded by enough concentrated lethality to sterilize a moon. "The truth, Lieutenant. We found the galaxy's apex predator. We just never expected it to be so polite about it. And somewhere far below, in a sanctuary filled with creatures that nightmares aspired to become, Jake Thompson was getting ready for another day at the office, blissfully unaware that he had just redefined galactic civilization's understanding of what it meant to be truly dangerous. After all, anyone could be a monster. It took real skill to be a monster's best friend.